Israel and Palestine have been effectively at war with each other since the dawn of time, as it turns out, but a lot of people don't know why. They don't know what's going on. Why are they at odds right now? Some stuff just went down. Hamas went into Israel. Israel retaliated. It's a huge mess. So I want to tell you guys why Palestine and Israel have a problem with each other. So let's talk about all of it from beginning to end. And if you disagree with me on this, hang with me through it, and we'll see where you stand afterward. I wanted to put up a map for you guys to see of Israel just because, it's a subject. But even the map is so hotly debated and contentious. I can't even put up a map for this. I did so much research for this, it's ridiculous. I have a 9-page outline. I'm not going to be able to hit it all, but we'll get as much as we can. Let me start at the beginning. This is a map of the area that we're talking about. This little spot right here that you see, I'm kind of circling it with my mouse. I made my mouse really big so you could see. This spot I'm circling says Canaan. This is Israel and Palestine and that whole entire area. Modern day Israel, Palestine, Jordan, etc., Syria, and Lebanon, and so on and so forth. You can see Egypt here. This is supposedly where Moses was. You can see the Red Sea right here. This is supposedly what Moses parted. As far as I can tell, Moses wasn't actually a real person. There is absolutely zero evidence that he ever existed, and there should be. In the Bible story, Moses goes from Egypt over to Canaan. Now, Canaan was inhabited by groups of people, different groups. There were the Canaanites and there were the Jews, among others. Now, Canaanites had their own pantheon of gods at the time. Just like, Rome and Greece had a pantheon of gods, Zeus and Neptune and Poseidon and so on and so forth. The Canaanites had gods that they worshipped also, multiple gods, some of whom included Baal. That was a Canaanite god. Catharat, Eshmun, Kothar, Lotan. If you scroll down far enough, you'll find that Yahweh was one of the gods in the Canaanite pantheon. Yahweh. The Canaanites, the people that lived in the same area as the Jews at the same time. Isn't that weird? They had a god that they believed in, and that god was named Yahweh. Eventually, the Jews adopted Yahweh as their one true God. The Canaanites were polytheistic, of course. They believed in multiple. And the Jews turned monotheistic, taking on Yahweh as the only God that they believed in, and that was part of the dictate. They could not believe in any others. And the deal that they made with Yahweh was, you protect us, and we will worship you and only you, and we will spread your glad tidings to the world or whatever. Quick interjection. I won't take long. I just wanted to tell you guys, YouTube's algorithm operates off of a few factors. Watch time, whether or not you subscribe, and whether or not you like something. So if you really want to help my channel, I would appreciate it if you guys watch the video to the end. If you don't watch it to the end, just watch a little bit longer than you would have otherwise. I would appreciate that very much. All right, let's get back to the video. Time went on, and Canaan eventually turned into two separate countries. The Canaanites were genocided or ethnically cleansed otherwise by Jews and others. Philistines and Palestinians were there, and a whole bunch of other people in the area. They all came in and swarmed and changed the layout of the map and who owned what. Now, the interesting thing about this little strip of land, I hear you saying, why would anybody care about this little strip of land? They were taken by empire after empire after empire. Why did anybody care? And the answer is because this little section right here, the section I have highlighted, this little section right here is Israel. And it's this little strip of land right here. And it connects Africa to Asia, to the rest of the world. That one little strip of land connects everything else. Connects those two continents. So trade was possible if empires took that little strip of land. If they didn't take that little strip of land, then they had to pay tributes or tariffs or whatever when they brought goods through that section. So everybody wanted that area where Israel sat. The story of Israel is one where it's taken over by empire after empire after empire. When one empire takes it, it's taken by a different one, and that empire falls. In 1000 BCE, 1,000 years before Jesus, came to earth or whatever, there's a boy named David. According to the books, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, kind of tells David's story, right? King David. David was a young boy, and the king at the time was King Saul. Now, David pissed some people off and ended up fleeing to the south. Now, if you know anything about Jewish lore, Jewish history, there were 12 sons of Israel and 12 tribes. Those 12 sons constituted the forefathers or the ancestors of these 12 tribes that existed as part of Israel. The tribes were led by Levi and Asher and Reuben and Judah and all of these 12 children. They led these different tribes that had different roles to play in the Israeli government at the time. But Judah, the tribe of Judah, split off and went south. This is about the best I could get to kind of portray what I'm talking about. The kingdom of Israel was up here. The capital was Samaria. People from Samaria were called Samaritans. Should tell you something if you were Christian at any point. The people in the south were from the kingdom of Judah. So Israel is the north, Judah is the south, and the capital of Judah was Jerusalem. The first 5 books of the Bible constitute the Torah in Jewish beliefs. They're written from different perspectives. They were not written by the same person, and it was not Moses. But the belief by Jews and Christians alike is that Moses was the guy that wrote the 5 books. Well, whoever it was from the kingdom of Judah because they were extremely critical of the north. Judah and Israel couldn't stand each other for a while there. They fought with each other constantly. The other 11 tribes lived in Israel, and the tribe of Judah lived in Judah. So in 1000 BCE, roughly, David is chased out of Israel and into Judah. He was just a kid. And according to the narrative, he becomes kind of a Robin Hood character. He's like well-liked among his peers and builds kind of a coalition or builds a name for himself, a reputation. And it comes to the point where King Saul was killed by his courtiers. And David walks in and becomes the next king. And the very first thing that he does as king, kill those courtiers that betrayed Saul for treason or something like that, high treason. David managed to unite this entire area. The whole thing was united under one kingdom, which was a ridiculous challenge. They had some type of an army. Throughout history, the Jews have had armies that went to war with various different factions, the Philistines and the everybody else. And David was the only one that managed to unite this little strip of land and get tariffs from everybody who passed through it. David seems to be a real person. We do seem to have physical archaeological evidence that David was a real person. Now, what do we know about him? Only what's written in the Bible, and the Bible or the Torah or the whatevers are not reliable because they were passed down as stories orally told to people, generation after generation. And you know how the game of telephone works. You whisper it to one person who tells it to the next person, tells it to the next. By the end of the line, it's a completely different story, right? The fish keeps getting bigger every time you tell the story. So I understand that Jews had a rich tradition of oral storytelling, and they told their stories through song and other creative ways of building it into their culture so it wouldn't be forgotten. But stories get morphed and modified and warped over time. Over the course of 1,000 years, the story's not going to be the same. So I'm very distrustful of the biblical narrative or the narrative from the perspective of the Torah. At this time, the Philistines and the Palestinians were in the area, okay? This red spot that you see here, Philistine states, this is modern-day Gaza. And it was up until, I don't know, 50 years ago or so, it was annexed and owned by Egypt. That's part of the big war. Well, Palestine currently owns the Gaza Strip. Okay, so David dies, and his son Solomon, King Solomon, takes control. He's the baby cutter, you know, the king that was a baby cutter. That story, if you're from a Christian background, the story about the king who was so wise, you know, this woman had a baby and her baby died, and there's another woman with a newborn, and she stole the other woman's newborn, and they went in front of King Solomon, and the woman said, "This is my baby," and the other said, "No, it's my baby," and so King Solomon said, "I know, I'll cut the baby in half, you both get one half," and so the real mother was like, no, she can have it. And he was like, "That's how I know that you're the real mother." So anyways, he's known as the baby cutter in my mind, or wise King Solomon in normal people's minds. So Solomon is the son of David. He takes the kingship, and it shatters under his reign. The kingdom splits apart into a billion pieces again, and he doesn't control it anymore. However, he does build a temple. That was around 900 to 1000 BCE. It's hard to tell. Again, the archaeological evidence we have from this time period is very slim. We're basing this off the biblical narrative at this point. So you got to take it with a grain of salt. So the temple being created was a big deal under Solomon. That was kind of the start of Judaism as a legitimate belief system. In their minds, the temple was like a theological touchstone. It was an important moment in their history. That was the beginning of the first temple. It was created under King Solomon. 586 BCE, the first temple falls to Babylon. The kingdom of Babylonia, as it's called. You can see this green area. Down here is where Babylonia was, and it's in modern-day Iraq. The Babylonians went up the Fertile Crescent all along this green area and back down toward the Dead Sea. And you can see Palestine, they went through Syria, and they took Israel and this whole little strip here, all of it. They took everything. The Arabian Desert was down here. They ignored the Amorites. Yeah, and they just took this whole spot right here. King Nebuchadnezzar is the one that took all this stuff. That's when the temple was destroyed, 586 BCE. Now, Nebuchadnezzar actually went in 601 BCE, about 15 years earlier, but it took multiple tries to hit Jerusalem before he finally took control of it. And it was a vassal state. He was controlling it. He was taking tribute from them and everything for a while, until the king of now just Judea, because Israel shrunk down and all of the Jews kind of went into Judea, which is like the southern part of Israel. The king of Judea at the time refused to pay tribute anymore. He's like, "I'm done." And that was 4 years into being captured by Nebuchadnezzar. Well, Nebuchadnezzar said, "Okay," and he just killed him. That was the end of it. And he destroyed the temple in 586 BCE. That date is extremely important to Jehovah's Witnesses. As I was once a Jehovah's Witness, I know exactly what that date is and its significance. Jehovah's Witnesses and the entire world used to believe that date was actually 607 BCE, but the rest of the world now knows it was 586 BCE, not 606, 607 BCE. Jehovah's Witnesses refused to accept that fact, and they've built their entire theology off of it and came up with some creative Bible math to calculate the end of the world was going to come in 1914. And, of course, that fell flat, so they said, "Whoa, Jesus really came back that year. It was just invisibly." Anyway, that's neither here nor there. That date is the year that the first temple that King Solomon built fell, and it's extremely significant in Jewish and Christian belief systems. It's a signifier that God had kind of given up on the Jews at that moment in history, according to Jewish lore and Christian lore and everything. According to the biblical narrative, when the Babylonians took Judea, they actually took all of the Jews back to Babylon with them to be slaves. But that is not actually what happened. Archaeologists believe that about 4,600 Jews were actually taken to Babylon. The Bible says it was 20,000, but that's still only 25% of what the population was at the time, roughly. So it was not all of them. In fact, it wasn't even like a high percentage of them. According to archaeology, it was about 6% of the Jews were taken and put into slavery in Babylon, which is horrific, but that's not the entire Jewish population as is portrayed in the Old Testament. So at this moment, Israel becomes Samaria, the home of the Samaritans. It previously the name of its capital city. And I'm not sure when it became known as Yehud, but at some point it became known as Yehud, and it was kind of its own province within either the Babylon Empire or what came next, which is the Persian Empire. King Cyrus comes in and takes over the entire area, took over Babylon and everything, all of Judea and everything, all of it. At which point the Jews, quote unquote, whoever the Jews were who were in captivity in Babylon, about 4,600 people, whoever's telling the biblical narrative is what I'm saying here. Whoever's telling the biblical narrative was likely taken to Babylon as a slave. They were freed, whoever it was, and ended up back in Yehud, or Judea. Israel no longer exists. It was all kind of condensed into a single kingdom called Yehud, which is the Arabic name for Jews, in the language of the area anyways. So King Cyrus of Persia sweeps in and takes out the Babylonian Empire in 539. So the temple falls 586 to the Babylon Empire. King Cyrus sweeps in 539. So we're talking a difference of about 40 years. So 40 years after the kingdom of Judea or Israel is captured, King Cyrus comes in and lets the slaves go. And when they get back, they come to Judea and find that Samaria is a kingdom above them now. So Israel is now known as Judea, or the home of the Jews is Judea. And Samaria, previously Israel, is actually home to people still. Now, the Sumerians claim that they are ancestrally Jewish. So they are from the other 12 tribes, not the tribe of Judah, but they are people from the tribe of Asher and Reuben and Simeon and so on and so forth. Or was that the name? I think it was Simeon. Anyways, so the Sumerians claim Jewish heritage. I believe they claim it to this day. And there are still Samaritans alive today. There are, as of 2022, 894 Samaritans alive. They have been ravaged by war their entire lives, basically. So, yeah. Their entire history, honestly. I swear to God, I'm getting up to the Palestinian conflict. This little pink section you can see here, this is Palestine. The Philistines were driven out by this point by, the Babylonian Empire and then the Persian Empire. Palestine exists in this little pink spot. This is the Gaza Strip. So at this point, they had an opportunity to rebuild their temple, 515 BCE, because the Jews returned to Judea, and the capital of Judea is Jerusalem. So they build their temple where it was originally, in Jerusalem, where King Solomon built it. So 515, they construct it, and there it stood for 500 years or so. So in 37 BCE, roughly 480 years or somewhere in that vicinity, after it was originally rebuilt, King Herod remodeled and expanded it. For the record, there is no evidence that Cyrus abolished slavery or that he had slavery. That's part of the biblical narrative. We don't know if that's true or not. The return from Babylon area, modern-day Iraq, to Judea was a slow trickle, not a big migration, the way that the biblical narrative told it. I suspect that the biblical narrative was just told from the perspective of a single person, and that person believed that everybody was taken and then returned at the same time. So after Persia, King Cyrus and all that, he frees all of them. They start to rebuild the temple in 515. Persia continues on to attack Greece in 499, and then a second wave in 480. Now, just try to give you some context for what that looked like, what the area looked like at the time. This section right here. This is Israel, and this is modern-day Iraq, and this is where the Persians were, like off of the picture a little bit here. They swept in, took over the Babylonian Empire, which existed in Iraq, took Israel, and then went up to Greece and took Greece. For the record, Cyprus, this little island right here that the hand is over, it's believed that that's where the Philistines were from originally. They migrated to the shores of Israel and stuff. So Persia goes on to Greece. They attack it twice. They took some territory. They weren't completely successful, but they got some. So that's 499 and 480. And then in the 330s BCE, Alexander the Great from Greece takes control of the entire area. He starts spreading Hellenism. The Greeks called themselves Hellenes at the time, or Hellenes or something. I don't know how it's pronounced. And Hellenism was the act of Greekification, incorporating the Greek culture into their own culture. 167 to 164. I'm just trying to give you like a chronological order here. 167 to 164 is known as the Maccabean Revolt. The Maccabees were a Jewish militant group that retook the area from Alexander's general, Seleucid. His empire, he was already dead. When Alexander the Great died, his Greek empire split into 4 sections, led by Ptolemy and Seleucid and a couple of others. I don't remember their names. Well, Israel fell in the Seleucid Empire. So the Maccabees were pretty much fed up with everything because the leader of the area at the time, the leader of the Seleucid Empire, his name was Antiochus. And he ordered the Jews to burn pigs on the altar in the temple, which obviously Jews don't eat pork. That's an extreme offense to them. He banned circumcision, and he ordered an altar erected to Zeus in the temple. This is part of the Jewish story, the traditional stories that the Jews tell. Is it true? We have some supporting evidence for some of this stuff. We're relying heavily on Jewish oral traditions at this immediate moment. So the Maccabees were a Jewish militant group that retook the area from the Seleucid Empire. And they created a little area, just a small little province, a little tiny state around Jerusalem and around the temple. Now, that is the source of the Hanukkah story, that battle that took place. The battle is very specific. It gets into a lot of detail, the story that's told about it. Mattathias was a Jewish priest. He killed the first Jewish person who was in favor of the Greekification of the Hellenism, and he killed the Greek official that was sent to enforce that rule about building a temple to Zeus, or an altar to Zeus in the temple, and burning pig and all of that other stuff. That was the start of the Maccabean Revolt. And from that moment on, it became its own state, and it was called Yehuda HaMaccabee. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It translates to Judah the Hammer. Some of this stuff isn't really necessary, but it's so super fascinating to me. I want to tell you guys anyways. Greece broke apart into 4 different empires, the Seleucid Empire, the Ptolemy Empire, so on and so forth. Those are the only 2 I remember right now. And then the Roman Empire sweeps in, right? So we start at Greece, and you can see the little corner of Italy right here, right? This is roughly where Rome was, in Italy. And Rome expanded out and took over the entire area, took over Greece, took over everything. It owned, like, literally all of this. This is the Middle East and Greece and Rome and everything. Spain's even in here, the British Isles. This is the Roman Empire. It owned Egypt and all of it, everything, top to bottom. At this point, the Jews had to kind of adapt a little bit to, like, living in the Roman Empire, and it wasn't terrible. They had some autonomy. The Maccabees gained autonomy for them for, like, a while anyways. The revolt happened 167 to 164, but they maintained fully independent state from 110 BCE to 63 BCE, so 63 years before Jesus came along, basically, or before he was born or whatever. That was, like, right in the center of the Roman Empire. Like, it overlapped because the Roman Empire conquered Greece in 146 BCE and, you know, this entire area. And then the Pharisees appear around 160 BCE. If you are a Bible-believing Christian, or you used to be, Pharisees probably sounds familiar to you. So what were the Pharisees and what were the scribes? They were framed as enemies in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe them to be enemies of Jesus, right? Well, they were. They were enemies of Jesus, but they were just Jewish people in the area at the time. The Pharisees were. Scribes drafted legal papers like marriage certificates and land purchases and stuff like that. There's at least one scribe per town, and they knew enough about the Jewish law to be able to challenge what Jesus said. Mark, the book of Mark, the writer of the book of Mark, believed scribes were Jesus' biggest adversaries. The writer of the book of Matthew, whoever that was, believed that the Pharisees were. The Pharisees were people who wanted to adopt more Roman culture into Jewish culture. They wanted to kind of integrate a little bit, which is something the Jews have not done up to this point. They've been conquered by nation after nation after nation throughout centuries, throughout millennia. And they've managed to not integrate into any other cultures fully, or not allow other cultures into theirs without a lot of time and effort, basically. So the Pharisees were a group that appeared around 160 BCE, 160 years before Jesus came around, and they were trying to push for rabbinicism. They are the basis for modern-day Judaism, the Pharisees are. They were considered legal experts at the time. That's why they were considered like one of Jesus' main adversaries, because they also had the knowledge to challenge the things that Jesus said or his interpretation of the Jewish holy texts, or ask him tough questions that only a Jewish scholar would know. Like, how knowledgeable are you on the subject? You claim to be somebody really special. You should know like everything about it, right? Well, the Pharisees believed that Moses had oral commandments as well, not just the written down commandments that he brought off the sermon. I'm sorry, I was going to say Sermon on the Mount, that he brought off the mount with him. The Pharisees believed that the oral commandments should never be written down. However, in 70 CE, the second temple that Herod remodeled and that was rebuilt after Jews returned from Babylon, the second temple was destroyed in 70 CE. So that's about 45, 50 years after Jesus was making a splash in the area. And it freaked the Pharisees out. And they're like, we need to write these down. Like, I don't care. We need to preserve this stuff. So they wrote down all of the information from the oral traditions, the oral commandments that were passed down from Moses' day. They wrote it all down for preservation purposes. And that is now known as the Talmud. The Talmud is one of the Jewish holy books that Christians don't use. Talmud, it's a big complicated thing. They're holy books, and I don't have time to get into all of them, but their holy books make up about 24 books total, 2,200 pages to the Bible's 1,200 pages, roughly. It includes the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. It includes the book of Psalms, the books of Samuel, Kings, Chronicles, and then they have Ezra to Nehemiah, collectively called the Tanakh. The word Psalms literally means songs. A lot of these beliefs and traditions and ideas were passed down through songs so as to maintain their credibility or their authenticity or whatever. So they aren't changed. So they can't be changed. They were packaged into songs that people would sing. So the oral commandments themselves were called the Mishnah. The Talmud included the Mishnah and was a big, long thing that was broken down that included all of the oral traditions and cultural expectations and everything in Jewish culture. The Talmud that's commonly used today is called the Babylonian Talmud. It was the most in-depth version of the oral traditions, and it was largely written in Aramaic. We were in 70 CE when the Second Temple fell. That was a huge moment in Jewish history when the Second Temple fell, because they kind of scattered after that moment. They dispersed throughout the rest of the area that we're looking at here. Roman Empire comes 146 BCE, and then the temple falls 70 CE. So they are in the Roman Empire currently, I believe. Titus was the army general that led the battle against the Second Temple. He was the army general at the time, 69 to 79 CE, and he was the Roman emperor from 79 to 81. I believe his dad was the emperor before that. Like, when the temple fell, Titus's dad was the emperor that oversaw that. Keep in mind, this is around the time the Gospels were being written, around now. 70 CE, 80, 90, all the way up to 110 CE, I believe. 50, 60, 70, 80 years after Jesus died is when they were all written down. Now, the Jews had a rich history of oral tradition, storytelling that would last literal millennia by putting it into songs that they could sing. Christians didn't really have it. Like, Jesus people didn't have time to write songs yet. So All of this stuff is warped completely out of proportion for Christianity, at the very least. It's certainly warped out of proportion for Jews also. Mishnah, I'm sorry, Kootmaster corrects me. Mishnah, it's Talmud and Mishnah. I apologize. Yeah, the pronunciations are going to be butchered, so I'm doing my best. I'm sorry about that. Jews kind of disperse into various parts of the Roman Empire, right? And they, of course, they stay around the area of Israel and Judah. They didn't completely leave that area, which is in this area right here, Egyptus and Arabia, this little section right here. Yeah, I think it's right above Arabia. If we just zoom in a little bit, take a closer look. It's right where these two things meet. Right here is where Judah, Israel, that whole thing was over my magnifying glass. It's at this point that Jews start moving into other parts of the Holy Roman Empire. They move into Spain and Italy and various other spots. They move into Greece. And at this point, two distinct ethnicities form, like actual full-blown ethnicities. We've got Ashkenazi Jews. Those are the ones that were in the area that is now Germany, roughly. Germany, Greece, that type of area. And then we've got Sephardic Jews, which are the ones that were in Spain, this spot right over here on the left. They are all nearly identical culturally. There are just a couple of little differences. Like for Hanukkah, for example, Sephardic Jews prefer to have a full set of candles to light for each individual person in the family. Extremely fundamentalist Sephardic Jews believe that only the men in the family should have the candles and light them. Ashkenazi Jews generally just have one set of candles per household. For the next 1,500 years, there is empire after empire after empire that comes through this area. And again, like the Jews still live here. There are still Jews in the area, of course. They did not leave the area entirely. And they're just like, they're getting like mistreated by everybody that comes through. There has to be an underclass in every society. And the Jews fit the bill every single time. There has to be somebody on the bottom rung who does the trash collection and makes minimum wage and lives in the tiniest houses and drives the tiniest horses and all of that other stuff. There has to be somebody on the bottom rung. That's how societies work since the beginning. As a government, I believe governments should make the bottom rung as enjoyable as humanly possible. They should redirect some of the money that the ultra mega rich have. They should redirect it a little bit to the bottom rung, the lower 5 to 10%, so that everybody's kind of enjoying life instead of having such a huge disparity. Well, anyways, at the time, Jews made up that bottom 5% almost everywhere they went. They were the persecuted minority. Because it's easy to persecute minorities. That's who you persecute when you're in a system or in a society, by and large. Like I said, the Jews are still in the area being persecuted for the next 1,000 years, from the 300s, when Christianity took control of the Roman Empire, which still existed, all the way through until, the 1800s. It was empire after empire after empire that was coming through and taking control. Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, came around the area in 632. That's when he died. 636 to 640, this is CE, Common Era now. A holy war ensued. The tribes of Arabia conquered the area in the name of Islam. And Muslims treated Jews a little bit better than some of the previous ones. They allowed them to practice their beliefs, and they didn't enslave them en masse, as far as I can tell, the archaeological evidence says. Because they were peoples of the book, quote-unquote. The word in Arabic that the Muslims used for it was AHLAL-KITAB. Al-Kitab, I think is how it's pronounced, maybe. Peoples of the book, i.e., Muhammad was not Jewish. He didn't believe in any of the Jewish stuff, though there's a rumor that his great-grandmother was Jewish, which would make him Jewish, but anyways, he wasn't Jewish, but he believed he was from the line of Abraham, just like the Jews did, so they both believed they came from the same place, ultimately. They were Abrahamic religions. Islam was kind of broken into a triangle with full cold-blooded Muslims who'd always been Muslims at the very top, and then converts, and then a variety of different people. Slaves and non-Muslims at the very bottom, but one rung above the bottom were people of the book, Jews and Christians included, and Samaritans. So they were near the bottom of the social hierarchy, but they were not at the bottom. They were called dhimmis, I believe, Dhimmis, meaning protected person. At this point, a caliphate existed. A caliphate just means basically successor to Muhammad. No, it means literally successor. It just means successor. That's what the word means. A caliph was like the leader. He's kind of like the Pope of Islam, if you will. And the caliphate is the empire that he runs. A caliphate controlled the area for a while. This is around the year 600 CE to 1000 CE, give or take. Ashkenazi Jews started speaking Yiddish around 7 to 900, give or take. At this point, the Al-Aqsa Mosque was built in Jerusalem. And guess where they put it? Right where the old Jewish temple used to be. So the third temple was the Al-Aqsa Mosque, effectively. Up until the year 1100, roughly, Muslims controlled the area, at which point the Crusades started, 1095 to 1291, to take back the Holy Land from Muslims. So southern France united with the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire. They started trying to invade that area to take the Holy Land back because they are all giga Christians in this area now, like ultra mega Christians. They didn't identify as Roman. They identified as Christian Roman. And that was very intentional. The leaders in Eastern Rome at the time encouraged that mindset. They wanted to make Christianity part of the identity. Like I said, the Roman Empire split up. The western part of it broke into a billion different kingdoms. You know, the kingdom of the Vandals, the kingdom of the Visigoths, and the Anglo-Saxons, and so on and so forth. But the Eastern Roman Empire still existed. So that was the Byzantines, and southern France area united with them in the Crusades to try to take the Holy Land back. Between 1095 and 1291, eventually they kind of gave it up. Egypt came in and took the area, and then the Ottoman Turks came in and took the area, and it was just traded back and forth between a bunch of people. Okay, that brings us up to modern day. Oh my God, I'm sorry, guys. That was a long story to get to modern day. Now, here's the roughly modern day explanation. Ottoman Empire owned the area from the 1840s until 1920s when Britain took control. We're talking Palestine, Judah, and that whole area. It was all owned by Britain, the British Empire at the time. Britain was being very imperialistic. They were in an imperialistic and colonizing phase at that moment in their history. They'd colonized a bunch of Africa. They'd colonized America, of course, and Australia and everything, and they were taking money from people left and right. That was 1920 when they took control of the area, and that brings us to World War II. Let's say 1932 all the way to 1945. We'll give it a nice big range. That's when the Jews are being heavily persecuted in Germany and the surrounding areas. Hitler rolls into Poland 1939. That's like the start of World War II officially, but it had been kind of going on behind the scenes for a long time. Hitler starts not just persecuting, but actually exterminating the Jews. And it was largely the Ashkenazis, because those were the ones that settled in that area. The Ashkenazi Jews lived in that little strip for a while. Germanic area, Greece, and stuff like that. Sephardic Jews lived in Spain, so they were a little bit more safe, but nearly every country was affected by World War II, except for that little strip of land in Palestine, now basically just owned by the British, and it was called Palestine at the time, I believe. That was unaffected by World War II largely, and there were some, attacks and air raids and stuff on it, but there's a whole heckin' sea between Germany in World War II and Palestine. So he can either cross the sea, supplies are low, how is he going to get an army across the sea like that? Or Hitler can go through like 16 different countries to get to that area. That is why Hitler was taking over the region at that moment and not going into Palestine. So Jews were fleeing to Palestine area as much as they possibly could. They were fleeing to America also, and just anywhere out of Hitler's reach. He did launch a couple of attacks on Palestine at the time, but they were repelled by the British, who still had a presence there. April 30th, 1945, Hitler dies. From the 1920s all the way through to when Hitler died, there was a migration happening. There were some Jewish scholars who had written that Jews should be migrating to that general area or anywhere because of the persecution that was taking place against them. 1922 was the first British census of Palestine. There were 83,790 Jews there in 1922. 12% of the population. Mass migration had been happening since really the 20s, but the 30s certainly, because of the persecution happening. Hitler dies, and then in 1948, 3 years after Hitler died, was the Arab-Israeli War. Okay, so tensions start growing between Jews in Palestine and Palestinians. 1947 comes along, and the UN declares Israel a sovereign state, and they had borders drawn out and everything. The UN did. They were all contested between Israel, Palestine, which is this little red section here, and Egypt and Jordan, which at the time was called Transjordan. Syria, Lebanon, they all fought each other nonstop, basically, for a while there. 1948, the Arab-Israeli War officially starts. Jews were secretly being supplied with weapons by Czechoslovakia, which I believe at the time was a vassal state of Russia. If it's correct, it will stay in. So 1948, Arab-Israeli War, the Jews rise up and they take a section with the supplies given to them by various different countries, including the secret ones. As soon as the Jews officially declare a state, Arabs from 5 different countries invaded. Israel repelled the attack, but just barely. I forget the 5 countries. It was like Palestine, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon. I don't remember all of them, but you get the idea. They all invaded. The Arabs were not getting along at the time in the area, kind of a civil war to some degree, and that united them when the Jews took control of an area. From 1948 clear through to now, there have been border changes like you wouldn't believe, like border change after border change after border change. If you look here, right here's the Gaza Strip, what I'm highlighting. It's this little westernmost spot right here in Israel. It was originally where the Palestinians lived, like originally, like 800 BCE. That's where the Palestinians were. The Gaza Strip is contested. The West Bank, which is right here, this is contested. East Jerusalem. The Golan Heights was contested throughout this time period between 1948 and now. It's all been contested. Well, 1967 is one set of borders. I believe we should go back to the 1967 borders, and I think Israel should stop being imperialistic and trying to colonize areas that they're not entitled to. That's my position. It's the right-wing government in Israel that is causing all of the havoc in the area at this moment. And I say that for a specific reason, okay? Listen to this. This whole area has been contested for 70-something years, right? At least longer. Oh, my God. Thousands of years. But the 70-something years that it's been contested, the Jews have been involved, like the past 70 years, right? Arabs finally give a 10-sentence resolution. They say, if you agree to this, we will walk away, and there will be no more border disputes, no more fighting, no more nothing. We will agree to peace, complete peace in the Middle East, if Israel can agree to this 10-sentence thing. Here it is. Complete withdrawal from the occupied Arab territories, which were outside of the battle line. They were not entitled to those areas. Okay, those are like settlements that they pushed on to take, that were not originally part of their lines that were drawn out. Complete withdrawal from the occupied Arab territories, including the Syrian Golan Heights, which is up here, top right, to the 4th of June 1967 line. So they wanted to go back to 1967 borders. And the territories still occupied in southern Lebanon, which is up here. The territories still occupied in southern Lebanon attain a just solution to the problem of Palestinian refugees to be agreed upon in accordance with the UN General Assembly Resolution number 194, i.e., you're going to take some area that Palestinians live in. If that's going to happen, you need to find a way to address the refugee problem that's being created by you taking areas that you are not really entitled to that we're offering to give you. That's basically what the resolution was offering. This is an apartheid state, guys. Israel and Palestine, apartheid states. That means that they're segregated. Okay, if you are Palestinian, you can't take part to any real degree in the Israeli government. To be fair, I don't think Israelis can take part in the Palestinian government either. I don't want an apartheid state. Unfortunately, right now, Palestinians are the ones that are being oppressed by imperialistic Israel at this immediate moment. 1947 partition plan from the United Nations. This is what it looked like. 1967 lines, this is what the Arab territories wanted Israel to agree to right here, where Palestine has 22% of the area. For the record, Palestine has 7 million people. Israel has 6 million people, and they have 22% of the land here. 2018, now split into two areas, A and B, and this is the Gaza Strip, as you can see, and it's the West Bank. Those are the two areas that are in Palestinian control, and this is what it looks like now. It's just all split up, and it's a mess. It's not good. And you know why? Because Israel keeps sending settlers in, kicking Palestinians out of their homes, putting them into open-air prison camps, effectively, and occupying areas they're not entitled to. So the leaders of the Arab territories in this peace agreement said, return to the 1967 lines, find a way to deal with the Palestinian refugees in a way that doesn't involve ethnic cleansing, which is what's happening right now. Accept the establishment of an independent and sovereign Palestinian state on the Palestinian territories occupied since 1967 in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, with East Jerusalem as its capital. So right now, Jerusalem is controlled half by Palestine, half by Israel. Israel will not acknowledge that Palestine is a state, and Palestine won't acknowledge that Israel's a state. This honestly sounds like an obscenely fair deal to Israel to me. They get this entire area. That's ridiculous how much they're getting out of this. They should absolutely be taking this, it seems to me. But okay. So that I'm only like on sentence 7 of this deal. So return to the 1967 borders. Palestine gets East Jerusalem as its capital. In return, the Arab states will do the following. A, consider the Arab-Israeli conflict over. Sign a peace agreement with Israel, and achieve peace for all states in the region. B, establish normal relations with Israel within the framework of this comprehensive peace. And what happened when they offered this? This is 2002 it was offered, 2007 it was readopted, and then 2017. What happened 2002? George Bush is in control. He's like, oh my God, this is fantastic. Yes, I love everything about it. Israel said, go f*** yourself. We're not doing that. Ariel Sharon was the prime minister of Israel in 2002. Ehud Olmert was in 2007. And then, of course, the current prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, was the prime minister of Israel in 2017, the third time it was offered, put on the table. All of them said, go f*** yourself. You're not getting anything. Israel said, we can't accept this because Palestinian refugees would live in Israel, and that's unacceptable. We live in a segregated society here, and we will not accept anybody of any ethnicity other than our own that lives in this state. Or if they do, then they're not going to have full rights as a full citizen, right to be involved in the government and everything. And the second reason they rejected it, Palestine would regain ground, which means more terrorism. Now, Palestine is not made up of terrorists. It's an absolutely ridiculous thing for them to have said. Yes, terrorists have historically waged war in Palestine, used it as a staging ground, a jumping off point, because Israel keeps doing shit like building illegal settlements and not adopting the 10-sentence peace offer. 10 sentences, okay? That's how long it is. The Crown Prince Abdullah of Saudi Arabia made the offer and said, in spite of all that has happened, and what still may happen, the primary issue in the heart and mind of every person in our Arab Islamic nation is the restoration of legitimate rights in Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon. This is in 2002. We believe in taking up arms in self-defense and to deter aggression, but we also believe in peace when it is based on justice and equity and when it brings an end to conflict. Only within the context of true peace can normal relations flourish between the people of the region and allow the region to pursue development rather than war. In light of the above, and with your backing and that of the Almighty, I propose that the Arab Summit put forward a clear and unanimous initiative addressed to the United Nations Security Council based on two basic issues: normal relations and security for Israel in exchange for full withdrawal from all occupied Arab territories, recognition of an independent Palestinian state with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital, and the return of refugees. Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital is a reference to basically having Muslims in charge there. Every step of the way, every turn, Israel has rejected offers of peace that are more than generous. Donald Trump claimed to have brought peace to the Middle East in July of 2020 with the Abraham Accords. In reality, he didn't. The United Arab Emirates, which is a country in that little area, the Levant is what it's called, United Arab Emirates, home of Dubai, officially recognized Israel as a state for the first time in exchange for Israel not annexing the West Bank in July of 2020. That was the agreement. You don't annex the West Bank, the UAE will recognize you as a state. That's the third state in the Middle East to recognize them. And, they agreed to it. But guess what? Now Israel has invaded the West Bank. I'm not talking recently. I'm talking like this has been happening for a while now. They keep pushing into it. So the Abraham Accords lasted all of like a year before Israel started pushing into new territory once again. So here's the bottom line. Hamas is like ISIS. They are freaking psychotic. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember what was happening with ISIS back when they first formed their caliphate. It was insane. They were doing the most horrific shit to people, and they were filming it and putting it on the internet. I mean, torturing and killing people right in front of a camera. It was stuff that will cause PTSD to watch. It's bad. I don't even want to say what was happening exactly. That's how bad Hamas is. They are bad. And Hamas just pushed into Israel beyond where the armistice lines were, beyond the borders, into actual Israeli territory, internationally recognized Israeli territory. Hamas is f***ing psychotic and needs to be stopped. But you know what else is happening right now? This is happening right now. That's a building, that's a high-rise in Palestine that was destroyed. How many people were in this high-rise who were just civilians, didn't do shit to anybody, sitting there petting their cat, watching Netflix? This is Israel retaliating against Palestine for what Hamas has done. I'm so frustrated with the fact that that Israel will not just accept the damn deal. It's been offered over and over again. It's a right-wing government that needs to go. It's comprised of right-wing fundamentalist, extremist people. I don't care if they're Jewish, they're Christian, they're Muslim, or they're secular. I don't want a far-right extremist government in power in any case, no matter what. Israel needs to stop occupying areas that they're not entitled to. And they need to stop hurting civilians like this. What the hell is happening? Accept the deal, Israel. And Israel, I'm sorry to hear you lost some people to Hamas. They're nutcases. Completely unfair. Take the fucking deal. I mean, that's my position. Hamas is a bunch of nutcases. Israel is full of nutcases. These people need to pull it together and accept the deal. I hope Palestinians get the rights that they deserve, the human rights that they deserve. And I wish that there wasn't an apartheid state there. Well, somebody pointed out that they cut the lights, so I guess some dude wasn't watching Netflix on that screen, or like in that building, because they cut the lights. Okay. The sad thing about this situation, one final thing I want to mention about this. Sad thing about this is that there's so much propaganda surrounding this, it's insane. There are people that are like Trump supporter, extremist, cultist nutcases about some of this. I found one propaganda website, okay? I've given you the context that you need, the cultural context, to probably understand exactly how this is propagandistic. I found this at the very end of my research. And I was like, oh, God, I got to pull this up. So they're debunking some myths about Israel here, right? Myth. Israel has been an expansionist state since its creation. Fact. Israel's boundaries were determined by the United Nations when it adopted the Partition Resolution in 1947. Sure, yes, that's true. Correct. But the claim is that it's an expansionist state since that point moving forward. So, okay, let's keep reading. Just kind of an unrelated thing to say when we're trying to debunk this type of myth, but whatever, let's keep reading. In a series of defensive wars, Israel captured additional territory. Defensive wars, you say? Captured additional territory, you say? I'm not sure how those two things, fit together exactly. If it's a defensive war, how the hell do you capture additional territory? Propaganda from top to bottom, all through this entire discussion, not just on this website, but my God, you can't talk about this subject without propaganda leaking through everywhere. Do you have any idea how hard it was to find this information and verify that it was factual? Holy shit. I've been researching for 2 straight days. I think I might have put 20 hours into this research in the past 2 days. For real. We got to cool down on the propaganda, guys. I know it's wartime. I know it kind of comes with the territory. Cool the propaganda down. Give people their human rights. Drop the far-right extremist fundamentalist shit, and accept the fucking deal, and I think we'll be okay. Anyway, that's my take. Let me know what you think in the comments. Good or bad. Tell me your thoughts on it, okay? I'll take any and all criticisms of my breakdown. And one final mention. I researched this myself and spent a ridiculous amount of time doing so. I'm very confident all of this is correct, but there's a possibility maybe I didn't get something correct. So I'm going to catch it in editing. I'm going to cut it out if it's wrong. Everything you hear in this video is correct to the best of my knowledge and completely correct. And if I don't catch it in that final editing stage, I'll put a pinned comment at the bottom with any corrections that belong here. So if you have an honest, valid criticism, put it in the comments, and I will pin it to the top. Was there a reason why both the radical left and the ultra-Orthodox anti-Zionists supported Palestinian cause? The reason the left supports the Palestinian cause generally is because the left tends to stand for human rights, and human rights are being violated in Palestine terribly with these settlements. It's like an open-air prison. It's bad. It's bad. It's real bad. Israel is committing atrocities right now over there and has been for a while now against Palestinians. That's the reason why. Do you know why the right supports Israel? Let me show you why the right supports Israel, if you wondered. You guys remember Michelle Bachmann? She was congressman for, in 2009, I think, for a term or two. This is her reaction to Trump losing the election.
I ask, oh God, that you would take your iron rod, and I ask that you would smash the clay jar of deceit in America, smash the clay jar of delusion in the United States of America, smash the delusion, Father, of Joe Biden as our president. He is not.
So, yeah, that was her reaction to Biden winning the election. It was kind of hilarious. I eat it up. Well, Christian nationalists been talking about Israel and the final battle being in Israel for, ever. Far-right Christian nationalist extremists, but Michelle Bachmann, Mike Lindell, or whoever else, they all believe that the final battle of Armageddon is going to start in Israel when a bunch of countries invade and blah, blah, blah. You'll see. Listen to what Bachmann said to this person, late September 2021. She's talking about when we left Afghanistan. She claims we left a bunch of weaponry and stuff behind. It's not true.
We're talking billions and billions of dollars. Now, again, a foreign terrorist organization. They're
the Taliban. Suddenly she doesn't like the Taliban.
For under American law, we are prohibited from giving any money or materials or weaponry to the Taliban.
That's correct, because they're a terrorist organization legally, I believe.
We gave them $90 billion worth of weaponry.
No.
ammunition, the finest military equipment the world has ever seen.
Well, I believe America does have the finest military equipment the world's ever seen. But no, we didn't give the Taliban anything. They didn't even take any of that stuff. It's completely made up. The U.S. left some things behind that were destroyed and disabled and not usable when we pulled out of Afghanistan. It was not taken by the Taliban. It was not used by enemy armies or whatever. You know what guns the Taliban uses more than anything? The Kalashnikov. It's the Russian version of the AK-47, basically. That's what the Taliban is using, not our M16s or a modified version of the AR-15.
Equipment the world has ever seen, including more helicopters than all of Australia has. That's how gargantuan this stockpile is. I think.
I mean, our stockpile as Americans? Yeah, sure. We got a big military stockpile. We didn't give that to Afghanistan.
It's 5 rifles for every Afghan. Well, it's unbelievable.
If I can interject here, I do believe this weaponry will turn up in the Gog and Magog war.
Gog and Magog war. You catch that? Ezekiel 38 and 39, she thinks it's going to show up in the Gog and Magog war. Armageddon.
Magog war, Ezekiel 38, 39. You read there about the weapons on the mountains of Israel. Some of this is the almost $90 billion in weaponry we left behind, folks.
Just completely made up.
And the Israelis are going to burn some of this weaponry for 7 years, which is the length of the tribulation. So again, folks, apocalyptic things are happening. And when I...
Just absurd. Every single time anything happens in the Middle East, this stuff takes place. Like, literally anything. We pull out of Afghanistan, and they turn to, like, apocalypticism. They believe that, like, it's going to be, like, 5 minutes before the Great Tribulation starts or some other nonsense.
Things are happening. And when I say that, I don't mean to say that to sound sensational. I'm saying
no?
They leap out of the Bible. That's what's happening here.
I had called you right after that happened. Yes, you did. And I said, I think that this may be a possibility that these $90 billion will be used for the Ezekiel 38, 39 purpose.
No, literally no to all of that. She's not even the first one to talk about it. She's certainly not going to be the last. I'm sure there are people talking about how this is the start of the apocalypse right now as you're watching this video. This is happening. Pat Robertson, all the way back in 1980, made a prediction. Listen to this one.
Why is Israel so important? I mean, what is it about this little bitty country that sits right down in the middle of, like, you can't hardly find it. They can't even put the name on it to put out in the ocean. What?
It's so important because it's the strip called the Levant that connects 2 continents. Trade goes through that little strip. That's why it's important. But okay, go on.
Makes it so important?
Now, God has called this in the Bible the navel of the earth. Now, a navel is sort of like the place where a child is attached to its mother, and God used this as the place where he entered into human history.
Wait, does he think babies are attached to the mother's belly button? Does he think that the umbilical cord goes from the baby's belly button to the mom's belly button? That would be hilarious. Sounds like what he's saying right now.
Human history. And that's why all the world, the United Nations and the nations of the earth, one day are going to come and move against Israel. In I'd give it 1982, but date setting is dangerous. I'd say within the next couple of years, we're going to see a war there. The next major war to be fought in the world is going to be right here.
And was it? Of course not. The Cold War was happening at this moment. Soviets were battling with, like, everybody. I mean, it was just complete chaos after 1980. Anyways, Pat Robertson had no idea what he was talking about. Michelle Bachmann had no idea what she was talking about. Like, none of these people have any clue what's going on. But, Zionists, extremists believe that Israel needs to exist as a state before Armageddon can start, because that's where it's going to start. And then, is it 2/3 of all Jews, or is it all Jews that just up and die when Armageddon starts? That's the belief of people like this. They don't support Israel because they like Jews. They don't like Jews at all most of the time. In fact, they hate Jews most of the time. People on the far right, Christian nationalists. But they need Israel to exist for their prophecies and beliefs to be cohesive. So they support Israel to their dying breath. They send as much money as they possibly can to Israel, and Israel's just eating it up, using that money to create settlements and kick Palestinians out and hurt people and bomb and everything, and it's just ugly. Judeo-Christian values, what are they? Right. Judeo-Christian values are fabricated. Judeo-Christian as a term didn't even exist until, I don't know, the 1900s, mid-1900s. I don't remember when it was invented, but at the time it was valuable for the Christian community to tie themselves to the Jewish community for political reasons. So they used the term Judeo-Christian values as a method of tying them together. In reality, Christian values and Jewish values are very, very different from each other. In fact, Christian values are all different from each other. There are no, like, Judeo-Christian values in reality. Frankenstein, they want to combine what is happening in Israel and Palestine with the second coming of Donald, Revelations, Apocalypse, and the entire nutter spread. Oh, and yikes. Oh, I know, yeah. Donald Trump is, in Christian nationalist minds, Donald Trump is Jewish. They believe he's Jewish. They think that after Israel was taken by the Babylonians and all that stuff, Judea was split off, and the other 11 tribes that were in Israel, they believe they crossed up over the Caucasus Mountains into the Great British Isles and ended up there as like Anglo-Saxons and came over to America and settled in America. George Washington, they believe, is Jewish. Christian nationalists believe this, for real. I'm not joking. Like Shane Vaughn, Robin Bullock, Michelle Bachmann, and others. It's like a full-blown conspiracy theory. And they think Donald Trump is Jewish. He's from the Jewish line, but the real Jewish line. The Jews that are in Israel right now are imposters in their mind. And they think Trump is like the Messiah. I'm not joking. Anyway, just insane, dude.